What's up guys, this is Miasin and today we'll be going over 45 board breakers and try to figure out which ones are the best this format, so post Supreme Darkness. Some of them are extremely janky and some others obviously are really good, so I'm not trying to discriminate. I will be covering as many board breakers that I know of, or at least that I could think of for this video. But yeah, anyways, before we go any further, you already know the drill. Smash the like and subscribe button. And also, massive shoutouts to my beautiful Crystron spreadsheet. Just in case you didn't know about it, here is the promo. Really recommend checking it out. So just in case you didn't know much before, the spreadsheet has absolutely all the info you need if you are planning on building the Crystron deck, which is the best deck that is coming out of Supreme Darkness. My spreadsheet features visual support, which includes images and videos, while being easy to understand, regardless of whether or not you had prior experience with the deck. It comes with 50 combos that show the most optimal lines when you are interrupted, but also through hand traps such as Ash, Imperm, every Molchemy monster, Dimension Shifter, as well as Artifact Lancia. Best part is, every combo comes with their own notes so that you can understand what's going on. This spreadsheet also comes with a YCS ready decklist containing my in-depth reasoning on every card and ratio so that you don't get confused and know exactly what to buy. And if you ever encountered issues with siding patterns, I got you, because I also cover going first and going second siding patterns against 15 decks of the metagame. This spreadsheet also covers some alternative techs and engines that could be worth exploring the deck, as well as their pros and cons. Having access to the spreadsheet also grants you access to an ever-growing Discord community of like-minded Crystron players, and also access to me, where I can answer specific questions and share updates with you. Speaking of updates, I'm even willing to add additional sections and combos to the spreadsheet if I'm asked to, and you won't have to pay again to benefit off of these updates. I'll be fully honest with you, if you're interested in Crystron, this spreadsheet will not only save you hundreds of hours of theory and practice, but also a lot of money. You won't have to make unnecessary purchases since you'll already have access to an optimal deck list, and you're not gonna have to spend your days and nights coming up with combos. Also, every time you forget about a combo, you can just go back to the spreadsheet and check it out to refresh your memory. If you're interested in the spreadsheet, all you have to do is PayPal me $20 US, and make sure to state your Gmail account in the transfer so that I know who to share the spreadsheet with. If you forgot to state your Gmail in the transfer, don't worry, just email me a proof of payment with your Gmail, and I'll share the spreadsheet with you as soon as I can. Unless I'm sleeping, I should never take too long to grant you access to the spreadsheet, so don't worry about the delay. The specs of the spreadsheet alongside all the steps to buy it are at the top of the description, so please check it out as soon as you can. Anyways, with that said, let's get on with the video. Alright, absolutely beautiful. Anyways, let's get right into it. So the first one is Ultimate Slayer, which, even though I would usually put it in must play, I actually will downgrade it this time. And the reason why I'm downgraded to great alternatives is because this card is not necessarily a card that you have to play either in your main or side deck. Even in the side deck, I don't even think this card is optimal anymore. And the reason for that is because Raziel Mitsurugi is gaining a lot in popularity, and this card is really mediocre against them. As a matter of fact, just board breakers in general are very weak against Raziel Mitsurugi. With a single X Raziel, they put themselves in a position where, regardless of the one board breaker that you have, it's not going to be enough. Raziel Fiendsmith, on the other hand, even Ultimate Slayer can be good enough on its own. So I do like the card, and I do think that if the Raziel Mitsurugi deck wasn't around, this card clearly would have been in this section, but just because of the gain in popularity of Raziel Mitsurugi, it's unfortunately just so much worse. And also, they can make Dweller now, so it makes Mirologic Aggregator, so the monster that you send off of Ultimate Slayer, just that much worse, which is very bad for you. Spellbound, I'm kind of hesitating between like these two. It's not like a super garbage card because, you know, going first it kind of behaves like a baby D-Bear against Raziel. They go normal summon I, special summon X, search as a sword, and then you chain Spellbound. And then your opponent cannot exceed for a monster or cannot link them off into Moon of the Closed Sky, so that's kind of cool. But going second, it's not really like it does much of anything, so this is almost more of a going first card than a going second card. But there is better going first cards anyways, so I really don't think that you need this for anything. I honestly think this card is kind of cap. Change of Heart is also not really good. Yeah, it's like a one of, I guess, if you want it as a thrust target. I think Triple Tactic Talent is still a better card than this. Soul Release doesn't really do anything this format, so I'm gonna put it in like and subscribe. Yes, make sure to do that, by the way. Cosmic Cyclone is actually horrendous, this format, just because it's a very FTQ-oriented format. It's not the kind of format where there's a lot of, like, small back row that you gotta take care of. There's less and less floodgates into the game, so Duster, Lightning Storm, Cosmic, these cards are becoming less important in Yu-Gi-Oh! But what's becoming even more important is hand traps and board breakers to take care of the monsters that your opponent summons. Those cards are annoying. Like, for example, if you got a Cosmic Cyclone for your opponent's Raziel Cross, you would have been in a much better position if you either had like a Duster to take care of that and also every other back row at the same time, or a hand trap on the duo drive. So instead of stopping, you know, the back rows when they are, you know, when they're already there on your own turn, you gotta stop like your opponent from even getting to those cards, because obviously everybody's searching the trap cards. Like the Malice deck is setting a bunch of traps. Again, you can play the cards to prevent your opponent from getting to that board instead of allowing the board to be made and then trying to break it. It makes absolutely zero sense. This card really has like almost no edge this format. complete dog shit. Really don't recommend playing it. Sphere mode is also actual trash. It's not even remotely close to being good because it is very bad against Reizo Mitsurugi. If you tribute them, I think all the ritual monsters will like revive themselves back. It's actually really stupid. And also, if you sphere mode over like a detonator that has Twins of the Eclipse underneath, you're really achieving nothing. So yeah, this card, I don't believe in it at all. Mirror Magic of the Ice Barrier. Yeah, no, this card really just does nothing at all this format. But I mean, it technically does have potential, but not this format again. So yeah, unfortunately, it's gonna have to stay there. Regeki, yeah, this card's not great against Detonator just because they can protect by detaching Material. But it's not like a complete garbage card. You can argue maybe as a one-of as a thrust target in like Tenpai Dragon, for example. It might make sense, but I'm still not a big fan of it, unfortunately. Swords of Concealing Light is obviously worse than cards like Book of Eclipse because it can be outed, so I'm gonna have to put it there. Maybe I'm gonna have to reorganize it here like that. Book of Moon is not like utter garbage. It's a very flexible card. It's good going first. Not good enough going second. Book of Eclipse is much better going second, but also much worse going first. This card doesn't lose to Ash, which is cool, but it's again, it feels too fair in an unfair format, so you can't really play old cards that are just way too 1-for-1-y. Like, the flexibility aspect of it is cool and all, but unless you're playing a deck like Ritual Beast, where you're trying to dodge like Nibiru, again, you would still be playing Book of Eclipse instead of that, so I just don't really see the logic of playing Book of Moon. Lightning Storm, it's not a great card. I don't really recommend playing it, so I'm gonna have to put it there, unfortunately. Duster is still the same, but to be fair, you can argue that Duster can still make sense in your side deck just because you can generically just side it in against everyone, not regardless of the matchup. Like, even if it's a combo-heavy format, a combo-heavy deck, just because you can still Duster some Imperms and stuff like that. However, in the OCG, this mentality does not work, because in the OCG, what they do is that they side out the Imperms when they go first, so that they have, like, all the Veilers still, because the Veilers can still be used, but you have as few, you know, back row as possible, because Duster and the Heavy Storm are extremely popular in the OCG, but in the TCG, nobody really plays this, so nobody respects the Duster. Everybody keeps the Imperms in, which makes a lot of sense, but I think this actually plays in your favor in the TCG, which makes Duster a little better. Evenly matched, this card's really bad. I'm still gonna have to put it there because it's not like utter garbage. It's still much better than these cards, this format again. But my issue with Evenly is that against the Razor Fiendsmith deck, for example, they can chain the Detonator and then destroy themselves, and then keep the Caesar, and then Detonator comes back with Twins of the Eclipse. So you wasted your battle phase, you wasted a card, and then your opponent still has 2 pops with Detonator, and then 2 negates with Caesar with the Lacrima and Fiendsmith in Paradise in the graveyard. So the opponent only really lost the Razor Cross, as well as, you know, 2 pops from the Detonator. So that's 2 less interruptions, because obviously Razor Cross is interchangeable with one of the pops from the Detonator. So that's kind of whack, honestly. You're going neg 1 and you're losing the ability to kill your opponent, which is really bad, because against the Razor Fiendsmith deck, you kind of want to kill them. You don't really want to let them start their turn with all the follow-up that they have, because their graveyard is stacked with Fiendsmith cards, and then they also have like Razor follow-up. They drew a card with the Razor Cross. I'm not a big fan of Evenly Matched at all, unless you're committing to like a full board breaker approach, in which case Evenly can maybe make sense if you like clean up the first part and then you let the other board breakers do something, maybe. But even then, I do not recommend this card whatsoever. And against Malice, it becomes a little better just because Terahertz is losing in popularity. People are playing IP and Abaoku instead, which I actually also think is better, by the way, Nightmare Griffin. But it's, it doesn't really change the fact that board breakers have never been good against Malice anyways. I still don't think it's going to be good enough. So yeah, that's just my 2 cents on the card. Forbidden Chalice, yeah, no, this card is not really good at all. A spell card, Soul Exchange. I mean, yeah, if your deck is Flunderies, but that's the issue. It's really situational because it's only good in like one kind of deck. But I mean, it's technically not garbage, so I'm gonna have to keep it there. Okay, Forbidden Droplet I actually think is like one of the only must-play board breakers in the game. This card is insane, honestly. It's so flexible. It's one of the only ones that you can afford to main deck because it's great going second and still playable going first. And it's also very versatile. Like, it can also kind of behave like a Book of Moon when, you know, your opponent tries to Veiler your monster. You change Droplet, you send it, and then you still negate some things, and your monster still resolves. That's so freaking cool. I love this card so much because of its flexibility, not because of its power level, because Dark Ruler technically has a higher power level than Droplet, but it's less versatile. It's kind of like comparing Ash to Nibiru. Like, Nibiru is a more powerful card than Ash, but Ash is a more generic card than Ash, so you still play Ash more often than you play Nibiru, for example. Anyways, Mind Control, this card is strictly worse than Change of Heart, but I'm still gonna have to put it, like, there, maybe? Something like that. I don't really believe in the card too much. Triple Tactic Talent is really good if you're playing a Razor-based strategy because your deck is already extremely resilient. So if you get a handshot, it doesn't really matter too much. Nobody's really gonna like rely solely on board breakers to beat your deck because Razor Mitsurugi simply does not lose to board breakers at all. You don't really care. So this card I think is really well positioned if you're playing a Razor-based strategy. If you're playing Malice, maybe less because they can chummy you on standby phase or they can Lancia you on standby phase, and then you're just looking at this card and you're like, yeah, it does nothing at all. So yeah, it really depends on the deck that you're playing, but I think this is one of the better, you know, non-engine board breakers that you can play. But I think the main reason why I like this card overall is just because it's kind of like Forbidden Droplet, where it's good going second and it's great going first. So yeah, but again, it does depend on what deck you're playing and what deck you're facing. Blink out, yeah, unless you're playing like Harika, doesn't really make too much sense. Spell card, Monster Reborn. I actually think this card's really nice. I actually saw some OCG deck list where people were playing this. I think against Orcus, this card is going to be really good when the deck is going to come out. Other than like chaining, like using this when your opponent like self-destruct the detonator so that you can revive back, or revive back the Requiem off of your opponent's Lacrima. It doesn't really do too much. Like, sure, it can be an interruption and get you a body on the field, but then you can't activate the effect of the monster that you summon, which is really frustrating, unfortunately. So yeah, it could have been a little better, but I mean, I still think it's a solid card overall. Dark World Puppetry. You gotta play Fiend cards in your deck, and unless you're discarding Fabled Luri, I don't really see how this card can be great. So yeah, it's very niche, but I'm still gonna have to put it there, honestly. Gotta put some respect on Dark World Puppetry. Of course, it's my boy. Book of Lunar Eclipse I already think is better than Book of Moon. You can afford to like not really care too much about the discard, depending on, again, the deck that you're playing. And being able to book 2 cards is kind of nice. The only issue is that it has to book 2 monsters on the field. It's not up to 2 monsters. And sometimes it can be super annoying. Like your opponent can go Detonator Pass with nothing else. And then you're like, oh, now I gotta commit to a monster and then activate that and then my monster dies. So it's like, it's a neg1 for no good reason. And you gotta discard a card just to flip like 1 monster upon control. So it's like a neg2 actually. However, into like big boards and also when you're going first, this card can be remarkable. Snatch Steal. Yeah, okay, no. Yeah, this card is not good. It's actually worse than Mind Control just because it's just gonna get popped by Detonator, whereas Mind Control, at the very least, is gonna force out the Detonator to like self-destruct. So this card is actually shit. Like, so bad, this format. Gestura Fenrir, I actually think this is a great alternative because it's very good into half boards. So if you're already playing a huge amount of hand traps in your deck, your opponent is doing something very small, like maybe Detonator Pass or like Caesar Pass with like the Lacrima in the graveyard, whatever, something that isn't too big. And Fenrir is incredible into like anything that is small. If there's like only 1 or 2 monsters on your opponent's field, Fenrir usually sweeps everything on its own and it also gets you another Fenrir, which means that next turn, if it comes to like a simplified game state or if you bricked on too many hand traps, you can count on Fenrir to actually allow you to just slowly, you know, control the pace of the game. And I think that this is fantastic for the card. It's honestly, it's a really good position depending also on the deck that you're playing, but I really like it and I do recommend looking into it generically just as a good going second card overall, but also just like Forbidden Droplet and Talent, it is good going first, so it's always there for you to help you out, unlike these 2 cards. So I'm almost like tempted to put it here, but it's not necessarily like a card that you gotta play necessarily. Triple Tactic Thrust, I'm gonna have to put it at the very top of great alternatives because it's not like a super generic staple. I actually don't really recommend main decking this card like at all unless you're playing like Malice Sky Striker, which I also don't really believe in. That deck is not really well positioned into Molcha Minialis and Artifact Lancia, and the fact that, you know, the Razor deck now has Twins of the Eclipse, so you're not really breaking boards easily anymore. But yeah, Triple Tactic Thrust is very good in the Sky Striker. Well, I mean, in a deck that can play the Sky Striker engine, obviously, because going second, you get like an extra spell in the grave, and then you search Engage, which is the ultimate cheat code. It's completely unfair. But also, Drolling Logbird is gaining a lot in popularity, which wasn't the case last format. So this card is actually worse going second. And going first, unless you're playing like really unfair normal trap cards, and you also get to like a certain level of like a combo, it's not really great. Like, you would have to like set Deck Devastation Virus or Harpy's Featherstorm for this card to really feel stupid. Otherwise, it's kind of fair, so I don't really care too much. Super Polymerization. This card is not great, but it is a card that does have a lot of potential. Duke of Demise is a new Super Poly target that could make this card a little better. It requires 2 Fiend and or Zombie monsters, so if your opponent has like DS E-Ray and Caesar, you can take care of those two monsters, but even then, your opponent usually isn't even ending on like those two. It's just gonna be like Detonator and Caesar, or like Detonator and Diacere. So I don't really believe too much in Super Poly, unfortunately. I think for Super Poly to be broken, we're gonna have to, we need Elder Entity Norden to get unbanned just because it's like the best Super Poly target out there. It's a Synchro and an Xyz, well no, a Synchro or an Xyz and a Synchro or an Xyz. So you can use like 2 Xyz, 2 Synchros, or 1 Synchro and 1 Xyz. There's 3 possibilities, it's really good. Book of Eclipse, very good card, definitely fantastic. Maybe I'm gonna have to put it there. I mean, it's good against Raziel Fiendsmith, actually, very good. But against Raziel Mitsurugi, they can just negate it. But if you successfully make all the monsters go face down, it's not bad necessarily, but I don't know, they can still Dweller you and stuff, whereas Raziel Fiendsmith, that's less of an issue, that's gonna come up less often. So the fact that you can at least book the Caesar and also force out the Detonator to like self-destruct, it's not garbage. So yeah, this card is not like ideal, it's not the best. I still think Droplet is a little more, you know, flexible, but yeah, Book of Eclipse is still also a decent card, but it's like I said, it's kind of worse than both of these cards going first, because your opponent can draw a bunch of cards on the end phase, and if you didn't have like an already very good hand, you're just gonna die on the crackback. Dark Hole is like mega garbage, because nobody's really giving you like annoying monsters this format, so yeah, I don't really like it. Maybe I'm actually gonna have to downgrade it here. Murmur of the Forest is such an interesting card. It has so much potential, and I actually think it's better than Change of Heart, so just in case you didn't know what this card did, it is a normal spell card that is not once per turn, and it reads target 1 monster on the field, or I think on your opponent's field, I forgot, change it to face down defense position, then you can return all field spells on the field to the hand. So you can target your opponents like Caesar or Detonator, and then bounce it, Book of Moon it, and regardless of what happens, you can bounce back the Raziel Cross, so that your opponent loses the cross and is forced to like self-destruct with the Detonator, or you can also book the Caesar and then also bounce back the cross, and then if you can out that Detonator, then you're in a great position. It's kind of like a worse version than Ultimate Slayer, that's the reason why it's just there, but Ultimate Slayer does require you to play a card in the extra deck, and this card doesn't, so it's a good option, but I will be making an in-depth video on this card, it's really good. Another card that I plan on making an in-depth video on would be a Burial from a Different Dimension, which is playable against Malice. And obviously this one is kind of self-explanatory, but again, I will be covering this very soon, and I think it's a good card actually. Very slept on, much better than Ghost Bell against that deck. Kurikara is way too reactive, takes way too long to be live, I do not like it at all. Dark Ruler, not too bad. It's very interchangeable between this and Duster, maybe. But the thing is, nobody's realistically going to play this card, because you don't really want to let your opponent full combo, especially against Raziel Mitsurugi, and they can just negate this, so honestly, I don't really like it too much. It's very bad, I think, in tandem with hand shops, because it defeats the purpose. If they can still, you know, you can't OTK them anymore, so they can still have, like, other, like, follow-up plays in hand, and then next turn you still die. And if you break on too many hand shops in Dark Ruler, it does nothing, where, again, if you break on too many hand shops in a Fenrir, it's actually a good thing. So that's something that I find really bad about Dark Ruler. It's just incoherent. If you want this card to be good, you have to play like a very specific deck that would allow this card to be good. Maybe White Forest can play this card in an interesting way. Like, worst case, you draw it and it's dead, you're just gonna discard it for your White Forest effects. That's always an option. Anyways, Gamma Seal, this card is probably... No, I was gonna say probably worse than Kurikara. It's interchangeable because it's so shit. Clashing Souls, garbage. Sky Striker Engine, very good, but also worse than before because, you know, Twins of the Eclipse just made Widow Anchor much worse. Now, when you Widow Anchor the Detonator, they just self-destruct and they still have 2 pops. So I really don't like this. Xyz Encore, this is one of the better ones, but the issue is that if you revive back your opponents like Sword Raziel, it still searches, whereas the X Raziel won't, because obviously there's a level 5 monster on the field, because the monsters gain a level, or maybe they lose a level. Actually, I think they gain. I forgot, but it doesn't matter. Actually, I think they lose a level. But yeah, but whatever. It doesn't really change too much. Yeah, no, this card, it just gives too many resources to your opponent, but it's one of the only ways at beating Abyss Dweller, actually. So that's something to keep in mind. Even if your opponent has, like, Dweller and Solemn Judgment, you do not care. So yeah, I think this card is a card that you can explore, especially if you're playing, like, Mermail, for example, where you auto-lose to Abyss Dweller, but you don't really auto-lose to anything else necessarily, because your Passadra, the Rumbling Atlantean, can just bounce back the Detonator, and then you're good to go. Okay, Metal Tronius, another extremely good card. I actually think this is much better than Book of Eclipse this time. And honestly, I think I'm actually going to have to downgrade Triple Tactic Thrust a little bit in hindsight. But yeah, Middletronius, this card is especially good in mirror matches, but even outside, as long as you're playing the Feast with cards, I think this card is good. You target Caesar, you summon your DS Ray, and then you make Requiem, etc. Or you target Detonator, you summon your own Detonator, and then you can banish both face down. That's also really good, but then you can be scared of like Caesar or an Ashe at this point. And even if you have cross out for the Ashe, I'll re-explain this, but it's not going to work. You're going to have to like cross out preemptively, which is so bad. It's so bad. It's horrendous. But yeah, Zoo King Alpha, or Alpha the Master Beast. Utter garbage. Yeah, this card gets followed by Detonator and then bounces back 0 cards. It's so bad. Same thing with Pancratops. It just does nothing at all, unfortunately, because its attack is too low, 26, and Detonator has 3k. And also, even if you could like run over, doesn't change anything. It can just protect itself, which is very frustrating. Anti-magic arrows, yeah, this is literally unplayable, has 0 applications right now. Herald of the Abyss, this one might actually be interesting. So for the rest of the turn, your opponent cannot activate the effects of monsters that ascend monster's name, which allows you to get rid of a Detonator, and then even if your opponent like chains to like self-destruct, if the Detonator does die, it can't use its effect again. So this card is low-key not too bad. I do like it. I'm actually not even joking. I think it's a card with a lot of potential, but I don't think it's a card that a lot of people will be playing either. It is a normal spell card that is also once per turn. So if you draw multiple of this, it's just not good at all. Really, really bad. But yeah, it could be an option to dealing with Residual Detonator. So yeah, keep that in mind. Vesper Girsu, way too complicated and situational for no good reason. Enemy Controller, yeah, this card is flexible, so I like it a little bit just because of that. Maybe it deserves to be very comparable to like the books and Change of Heart. It's definitely better than Mind Control and Snatch Steal, because like those cards are just not good at all. Yeah, Enemy Controller, at the very least, it's an interruption when you go first, and you can dodge Valor Imperm and stuff like that. It's also cool that you can transform Baguska from defense to attack position, so that basically translates as like a infinite permanence on the Baguska. So this card, sometimes the other effect can actually serve a purpose. Yeah, anyways, Interrupted Kaiju Slumber, yeah, this card is worse than Darkhold because you gotta play like 2 garbage cards on top, which is not good, because when you draw too many of them, then this is where your hand becomes like actually unplayable. And finally, Lava Golem is slightly better than Sphere Mode, but still utter garbage. So yeah, that's it for my tier list of the best board breakers to play post Supreme Darkness, so obviously this format. As you can clearly see, the only cards that I think you absolutely have to play are Forbidden Droplet and Triple Tactic Talent. And even then, I can even argue that Talent can be side-decked or, I mean, just not played at all, but I think it's a good card. If you're playing Raziel, for example, this is, like, even better, but I think that these 2 cards are, like, your best friends moving to this format. And then everything else, it's just a great alternative. Like, you can play them, but you don't have to play them. As a matter of fact, I think Duster is like one of the least necessary cards in this section, but it's still a really good card. Every card here is good, so yeah, just again, just keep that into consideration. But yeah, that's all I had for this video. So guys, thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and let me know how you feel about this tier list. If you have any complaints or anything, I really couldn't care less. But yeah, I appreciate you watching, and I'll see you guys very soon. Peace.